Greg here with North Carolina Science Olympiad, and I'm here to give you, the competitor, a heads up about what to expect on a competition day when you come to test either your balsa wood tower, bridge, or Boomilever. Now, obviously, I only have a balsa wood tower here, but the expectation of what you should be bringing and doing on competition day, whether that be at your school, at a regional tournament, or beyond, should be relatively similar for both bridge events and Boomilever events. This video is coming out ahead of the 2024-2025 Science Olympiad season. And I do want to note that this tower is not a rules compliant Division B or C tower for this year. Also, for those competitors in Division A, our youngest competitors, these tips and tricks and expectations will be similar for what you will also see for your pasta structures at your tournaments. So, what to expect on competition day? First off, you need to know what to bring. You need to bring yourself and your teammate if you're competing in a pair. You need to bring your structure to test. And I recommend not running around with it in your hands like this. These structures break easily, and you do not want to damage this on the day of the test. So I recommend put it in a box and carry the box around with you. You can put packing peanuts, paper, balled up pieces of paper, anything to take up space in that box, but you want to keep your structure safe while you're carrying it around. The second thing that you need to bring is a pair of eye protection. I'm wearing a pair of safety glasses, but you can also use a pair of goggles that will be provided by your teacher, your parent, or your coach. We want to make sure that if in the case of a structure breaking, that if any pieces are to fly towards your eyes, that they are blocked and they do not get lodged in your eyes. We want you to go home safe and sound, but maybe instead of one piece of balsa wood, you have many. Okay, so you show up to the event, you have your tower, you have your eye protection, you have your partner, if you have one. What to expect? You're going to be greeted by a volunteer at the event, and they're going to walk you through the check-in process before you can then come test on a breaker. You're going to place your tower or your structure on the table in front of them so that way they can have a good look at it. They're checking the rules to make sure that your tower was built in compliance with the rules. They may take some measurements, such as the height of the tower. They may look at the base and see and make sure that it is wide enough to span across the hole in the breaker or to span across whatever dimension is in the rules for that year. They're also looking at the material that you built your tower out of, and they may ask you some questions about what type of glue did you use? Why did you use that glue? Why do you have different types of wood in your tower? Why did you choose this design for your diagonal bracing? Be prepared to answer some questions about the design, construction, and materials of your structure to the volunteer or event leader on competition day. In addition to taking measurements of the size and checking what your tower or structure is made out of, the event leader is going to ask you to get the mass of your structure prior to testing. So we have a very sensitive scale that we use, and it'll be at the check-in table. And for towers specifically, if able, I recommend placing your tower on its side so it can be massed. Sometimes, if that's not available, you can place your tower upside down on top of the scale so we can get the mass. Typically, the bases of the tower are too big for them to be put on the scale upright. For bridges and Boomilever's, you'll have to do a similar either on the side or upside down in order to get the mass from the scale. After you've been checked fully in by the volunteers or the event leader, you'll be asked to wait until the next available test apparatus or breaker is available. Please wait patiently and keep your safety glasses or goggles on during the entire time that you're in the test area. If you take them off, typically you are afforded one warning, and after that warning you'll be asked to leave and disqualified. To set up for the test, you will be asked by a volunteer to approach a breaker, and then you can then begin setting up your structure to be tested. So as I said, this is a tower, and we are going to set it up on this structure, on this test base. Just so that you, the competitor, know, this whole assembly is the test apparatus, and this part on top is the test base. There is a 20 by 20 centimeter hole in the top of the test base, and your structure for towers and bridges must be able to span across that opening. There may be additional rules regarding load bonus zones, so refer to those rules for the year that applies. So you have your structure atop the test base. Then you are going to thread the chain of the loading block assembly through your structure. You want to do this carefully, and you can also do this off of the test base if that makes it easier. But you want to be able to get the chain all the way through your structure so it hangs down. Now, I'm going to get that lined up the way that I want it. I'm going to make any adjustments to the loading block so it's sitting evenly on my structure. I'm going to check, make sure that there's no kinks in the chain, make sure that my structure is completely spanning across this 20 by 20 centimeter opening in the test base. And looking at that, everything looks good. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to take the provided S hook, looks like an S. I'm going to first hook it onto the rope or the handle of the bucket. See? I want to do this first, and then I want to hook the bucket onto the chain at an appropriate height. You want the bucket to be at least 2 or 3 inches off of the floor, but you do not want it to be touching the chute of the breaker here. So for instance, this looks a little bit too high. So I'm going to take the bucket off and I'm going to move it down 1 link in the chain. So that looks good. As you can see, there's a little on the end of the chain below the S hook, and I don't want that to get caught up in this, the end of the chute. So what I'm going to do is hook that back onto the S hook by itself. I'm going to take a second. I'm going to look and make sure that everything is appropriate in the way that I want it. Everything looks good. And so then we'll start the test. If you have a partner, or there are two of you doing the test, one of you may use these provided stabilization sticks to use on the bucket to keep it from swaying or rocking or twisting as the sand is loading in the bucket. To use these sticks, you're going to hold the end with the tape, this end, not the spring door stopper end. Hold the solid end. Then the tips of the spring door stoppers will touch on the flat part side of the bucket. Do not put them up at the top, and do not put them below the bucket, like that. You want the tips of these to just be barely touching this. And even with just that, I can still move this bucket around, I can push it, but I can't lift up on it at all. And that's intentional. The other partner, or if it's just one competitor, will then be operating the breaker by using the lever. We have a metal breaker shown here for demonstration purposes, but a PVC style breaker or plastic breaker will operate similarly. So the person operating the breaker will pull the lever. You can see this one has a big spring attached to it, so you might have to pull hard. But pulling that lever opens the jaw at the end of the chute and allows sand to flow from the reservoir down into the bucket. Your test will stop when one of three things happens. First, you run out of sand in the reservoir. Your event leader or whomever is running this event should have checked prior to your test that there is enough sand in the bucket, in the reservoir, such that when you run out, the bucket will have at least 15 kilograms of material in it. So, one way the test ends is you run out of sand. A second way the test ends is your structure breaks. If that happens, the competitor operating the breaker device needs to shut the flow of sand off as quickly as possible. That way we can get the most accurate measurement of how much material your structure withstood. And third, the third way that a test could be ended is either if the bucket is touching the floor or is deemed to be supported by another part of the test apparatus other than the chain and the S-hook. An example of that is if the bucket were to lean or list over like that and start touching the chute, then that would be cause for at least the test to be paused, if not stopped altogether. The event leader and the volunteers have the right to stop the test at any moment. If they say stop, whoever is operating the breaker should shut the lever and stop the flow of sand as quickly as possible. A portion of sand may be removed from the bucket if the flow of sand is not stopped in a timely manner. So the test is ended and you have sand in the bucket. So either yourself or a volunteer will remove the bucket of sand from your structure. Then if your structure remains standing, you're going to want to put the S-hook into the bucket and then remove the loading assembly and chain from your structure. and put that in the bucket. If your structure broke during the testing, you need to remove any bits and pieces of your structure from the bucket. After that, the volunteer or event leader will then take your bucket and it'll be weighed. They should ask you to read off what the weight is of the amount, the mass that your structure held, and then confirm your results as far as any competition parameters, design parameters, and that such. Typically, your overall score will not be given to you on competition day. Some things to note as frequently asked questions. If you have more than 15 kilograms of sand in the bucket, typical years are that 15 kilograms is the most mass that you will be scored against. So if your structure held 16, 17 kilograms, that's fantastic. But it will only be scored up to that 15 kilogram mark. If your reservoir runs out of sand, there should be enough sand in the bucket. However, if you want to get every bit of sand out of there, you can take a stabilization stick and swirl it around in the reservoir to knock any remaining sand down the chute. I do not recommend shaking the reservoir to get all that sand out. Finally, if you have any questions regarding the rules or any interpretation of the rules, please reach out to your coach. And if your coach doesn't know, have your coach reach out to the North Carolina Science Olympiad if you're a North Carolina student. And we will do our best to get you an answer quickly and concisely. So, common questions that coaches and competitors have regarding the structures events. These answers are going to be generally focused on general years and there's rules, but do confirm the rules for the year that you're watching this, as rules change year to year and are different between towers, bridges, and Boomileavers. So, what happens if you have more than 15 kilograms of weight in the bucket at the end? So, as we stated previously, this event is about the efficiency of your competitor structures and not the gross overall strength. Although it is cool to see how much weight you can load up on a structure, and believe me, I enjoy that as a structural engineer, we are more interested in the efficiency. So, with that, the rules are typically capped at the maximum amount of weight that can be held for scoring purposes is 15,000 grams. So, if you have 16,000 grams of material in the bucket, and that's what is weighed, the score will be counted as if there was only 15,000 grams. Another common question is what to do when there is sand stuck in the bottom of the reservoir at the end of a test. So a lot of times a well-constructed structure or a very stout structure will exhaust the amount of sand in the reservoir. What I recommend doing is taking a stabilization stick, inserting it, and then gently swirling it around, knocking any leftover sand down into the chute. However, I also recommend that the amount of sand in the reservoir be increased from what is typically in the rules. from the national standard of 15.2 kilograms of sand to over 16 kilograms of sand. Therefore, when there's only a little bit of sand left, you can guarantee that there's at least 15 kilograms of sand in the bucket at the end of a test, and then not have to do any stirring or any shaking of the reservoir. In the 2024 season with towers, there were a lot of questions about the load bonus. How is that scored? How are you eligible for that? And how does that actually affect your score? So, in 2025, and again, in future years, the rules may vary, so please read the rules before asking questions. But in 2025, in addition to the 20 by 20 centimeter opening in the test base, there will be a 29 centimeter diameter circle either drawn on the test base or it'll be on a printed copy of a test base that'll be used at check-in. So, in order to be eligible for the load bonus, the structure must bear atop the test base only outside of that 29 centimeter diameter circle. If before testing and during testing, any portion of the structure touches inside of this 29 centimeter diameter circle, then you are no longer eligible for the load bonus points. To clarify, the bottom of your structure must only touch outside of this circle to be eligible for the load bonus. If any part touches inside the circle, it is ineligible. Now, to those people listening carefully, you know I said eligible for the load bonus. Just because your structure touches only outside of this circle, both before and during the entirety of the test, does not mean you are automatically given those points. So the second criteria for the load bonus points, after only being supported outside of the circle, is to also hold at least 15 kilograms of material. At that point, once you have been deemed eligible by bearing on the test base only outside of the 29 centimeter diameter circle and holding at least 15 kilograms of mass, is a competitor's team awarded the load bonus score. If there are any questions with that, feel free to reach out to the coaches, to North Carolina Science Olympiad, and we'll get answers and clarifications to you.